given the talk a title, and the title of the talk is Life Happens, Live It. And this is an anacrostic poem based on the words life happens, live it. I won't read it all to you, but there are lines like, you're as happy as you choose to be. Learn new things, read a book, take a class, ask questions, involve yourself, set a goal, make a plan, do it. This is an E from Life Happens. Educate yourself, become an expert, be a leader, encourage others. Lots of things that Rotary do, in fact. Some fun things too, like in Live It. Love a pet, adopt a dog or a cat. Animals are great companions. It's a fun poem, but it has a real deep meaning, as you will find out in a moment. Ron asked me last week if I'd talk about Oregon, because I'd been there for a couple of weeks, 10 days, immediately after the President's lunch, the handover dinner, we flew to Oregon. And he said, oh, I don't think anyone's ever been to Oregon. Perhaps you'd like to talk about Oregon.
You've been everywhere,
so I thought, well, that'd be like a geography lesson. And I don't want to give a geography lesson. Oregon, if you've got one of the Oregon books, is a beautiful state. North of California, south of Washington state, and it contains a number of climates. You have the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. You have the Willamette Valley, which runs between the mountains on the coast and the mountain range that includes Mount St. Helens. Somebody's got a Mount St. Helens book. Everybody knows that. That's the volcano that blew its top. Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, that goes all the way down to California. They're all snow-capped mountains. You get over the other side of the mountain and it starts to become more desert, rolling plains, wheat fields and so on. So you've got all these different climates within Oregon. And if I just talked about Oregon, that's it, lesson over. Most beautiful state. So I thought, how can I make this a little bit more personal rather than talking about facts and figures of Oregon? And it dawned on me, why did I go to Oregon? How did I ever get to Oregon? Because if you say to somebody, they say, where are you going for your holiday? Oregon. Oh, where's that? But then you have to explain, and so you give things like, well, it's on the ocean, or we all know where California is, north of California. We've all heard of the Columbia River, the Great Columbia River. We've all heard of the Oregon Trail. So you mention these names, and they've got a rough idea of where Oregon is. How did we get there? Jerry introduced the talkers out of, what was it, Great Oaks from Little Acorns Grove. From Little Acorns, great oak trees grow. Have you ever had a moment when something happened that was quite small, quite insignificant, that has affected your life way, way, way down the line, but you didn't realise at the time? When we were first married, we had, Janet had gone back to teaching, the kids had just started school, and she was at Engain School, and she came home to me one day and she said, what do you think about having an American teacher for a week? We've been asked if we would like to put one up. They're on a part of their course. It's the nearest we'll ever get to America. We were poor, we were just scraping by. We had these two little kids, and so we said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll just we'll put somebody up. So at the time I was playing in the band, so I was out on the Friday night that she went to collect the teacher, and she came back that Friday night with this girl. It's not a wonderful picture because it's a photocopy, but it says on there, English outfit on Kathleen, 86. Well, it's that's not how she looked in 86. She was younger then when we met her, because the dates elude me. If I say to you, it was 37 years ago that we had this conversation and that she came to stay with us. So I was out working, Janet met this young lady and she sat talking, and we went to bed when I got home, and I just said hello and we had a drink, went to bed. She said, there's something funny about this girl. She said, she's got a wedding ring on. She didn't talk about a husband as at home or divorced or anything like that. She said, I think she's a nun, you know. So next day we got up Saturday and we started talking, had breakfast, and she was very nervous, and we got round to talking about what she did, and she said, I'm a nun. And she looked like that. Wow. She said, it's not a problem, is it? I said, it's not a problem for us, it's just, you're not what a nun looks like. I've never seen a nun like you. So she said,
penguins.
While we're talking about that, she said, where's the nearest Catholic church? I said, well, Upminster there's one. I said, but I think they have one in the pub. On a Sunday morning at the Golden Crane, they have a service in the bar. And she said, well, that sounds interesting. So anyway, Sunday morning, she goes down to the Golden Crane and goes and has a Catholic service in there. And she came back, she has the best service I've ever been to. They all ought to be like that. Well, since then, of course, they've built St Peter's Hall. But that was how it started. We got on like a house on fire. She left her luggage with us while she did a tour of England and Scotland and Ireland. She came back. We were going to my mum and dad's at Eastbourne for our holidays. And she said, well, I'll go into a hotel while you're for a couple of days. She said, no, I'll stay here. My mother was horrified. She said, you left a stranger in your house. I said, she's a nun. She said, well, they can all pinch stuff, you know. So anyway, so we left her in our house, and our next door neighbour kept an eye on her. And when we came back from our holiday, she'd gone by then, and all the kitchen had been decorated with these big smiley faces and thank yous, and because she is a wonderful artist. And that small thing started this friendship, because she went back, we wrote, that was it, that was the nearest we would ever get to America. A few years later, her parents were coming over to meet their youngest sister. We'd been on a singing tour. I went up to London, picked them up, brought them back to Essex. We went out for a meal, took them back to London, and just met them for the day. And the mother was the matriarch of this family that we didn't know at the time. And the father said, George, he said, you've got to come to America. Fix a date. Fix a date and stick to it. So he said, 1981. That's when we'll go to America. So, did we save? No, because we had no money to save. We just kept going on, and eventually we got to 1918. Christ, we were supposed to go to America next year, we haven't got any money. So Janet says, well, we'll go and get a loan. So we went to the bank, I think it was Barclays Bank, and we said, we'd like to take a loan out for a bathroom, please. Oh yes, how much would that be? That would be 1,500, I've got figures, but £1,500. Lovely, thanks very much. And we come back, we've got the money, and we went straight into the estate agents, not the holiday agents, and we bought air tickets to go to America. So that was how we got there. On the first day, we was having all the family round to the mother and father's home, and they did not want to meet us. They didn't want to meet stuffy English friends of yours. They still imagined foggy London town, bowler hats, pinstripe trousers, rolled umbrellas, and I think that's what they thought we were going to look like when we turned up. Well, do I look like a stuffy Englishman? I can't even speak the Queen's English. We got on like a house on fire with all these people, and we've been friends ever since. We've shared great joys and great sadness, parents dying, and they've been over to weddings, and we've been to weddings. In fact, the reason we went on the last one was for one of the weddings of one of the grandchildren. And and so it's been this wonderful, wonderful friendship. I've been spoiled with a life that I couldn't leave here. I mean, Kathleen's a nun, she works for the, I'll say for the church, it's for the convent really. Most of them are teachers, and what they earn goes into the pot, and then they get out what they need. As long as I've known her, she's always lived outside of the community. When we took her, that was an outfit that Janet took out for her, and she dressed up, and we took this picture of this lovely young lady wearing her English outfit. I'm going to leave out a whole chunk of these 37 years, because you'll be here for 37 years if I talked about all the events that have happened. But the reason for the fish was when we went back, Janet and I, on our own, several years later, when the kids had left home. They're back now.
Kids are for life, George.
Kids are for life, yeah. But one of the brothers took me salmon fishing, and I caught that salmon in the Columbia River, and it was 39 pounds in weight.
Wow.
And it looked bigger than that when it was caught, because it still had this has been gutted and cleaned, and that's frozen as it is. We carried it back all the way from Oregon in a box, and if you can just see a little white tip on the nose, and that's the part that started to defrost when we got it home. We just arrived home. I unpacked it and realised we had nowhere to keep it. Our freezer was upright and we couldn't get it in the freezer, so we had to find somebody. It was too hard to cut, so we had to find somebody with a chest freezer, and later we had a barbecue in the summer. So that was on our second visit. But I'm going to move forward. After all these events and all these happy things, I'm going to move forward to November 4 years ago. This little guy at the bottom, it says George with Jacob. He was not born when we first went to the States. You can see there's a baby there. I think this is in about 85, 86. The youngest sister that we'd met when Kathleen's parents came over, the one that had been in the choir, had since married and had 2 boys, Jacob and Bradley. Bradley was the one that got married a month ago. Both of them, they lived on the side of Mount Hood. They were country boys. They loved fishing, shooting, hunting. That's their life. And when they grew up and left school, they went into forestry. They went to university in not Idaho, Montana. I think it was Montana. And they learned how to look after forests. They were lumberjacks, if you like, and they still love their fishing and shooting. Jake, the oldest boy, had just graduated and was like most young early 20s guys, liked to go out drinking with his mates. And several times he went out drinking with his mates and drove dangerously and could have had an almighty accident. Never survived. How many of us drank too much when we were young in the days before the breathalyzer and drove and took chances? We all did it. I know I did. And he admits it. But in November, 4 years ago, he come down to a place called Tillamook, and he was in they'd stopped to get some petrol, and he was waiting by the car, and this young guy who had been his neighbour on the side of Mount Hood where they lived, so he said, "Jake," he said, "you've grown." He said, "Oh, look at that." He tapped his old tummy, and he said, you've got a big boy. And Jake had filled out. Because they used to saw these great logs, and all this axe throwing and using the chainsaw competition, all that. He really beefed up. And they both had a drink. And this guy, I wanted to read the book. This is why I'm mad that I forgot the book, because the actual passage is in his words. But this guy came up behind him and got him in a headlock put his arm through his arm, got it round his neck, and because they were both drunk, they pitched forward, and Jake hit his head and broke his neck. And they said, get up, get up, get up, stop messing about, get up. And he said, I can't. And because the guy that did it was just pulling him and trying to pick him up, and he said, I can't move, I can't. His mate came out and said, what's going on? He said, he's fooling about, he's messing about. He said, no, he said, I think I've done something serious. And he was paralysed from his neck down. They airlifted him off to hospital, and since then he's been in a wheelchair. His mother dedicates her life to him. They had great fun. He is a funny boy. He was the best man at the wedding. He gave one of the best man speeches. One of the little things he said, they have a pre-wedding dinner, a rehearsal dinner, and there were about 40 of us there. And he said, when Brad first said that he was getting married, and he gave it, and they fixed the date, he said, Guy, he said, I was so mad because it coincided with a college football match, the American football match. He said, no, I wanted to see it. And so he said, well, don't worry. He said, it'll be recorded. He said, brilliant. He said, I'll watch the wedding recording later on. And that was Jake. He, from the moment he broke his neck and came to in this hospital, he has said, life happens, live it. I can't do anything about it. When I saw him the first time, I drove with him from Portland right down to San Diego in Southern California. He was going to one of these places where they try to teach people with paralysed people how to use the spasms in their muscles to try and get them standing up and make as much use out of their body as they could. His fingers are deformed because of the nerve endings. He couldn't feed himself. He obviously couldn't do any toileting himself. He couldn't do anything. His mother washed and shaved him until one day he complained about her shaving him and being rough, and she said, well, do it yourself. From that day on, he shaved himself. The first time took him 2 hours, I believe, just to shave himself. He can now feed himself. He's got this electric wheelchair that he zooms about in. And he can move his arms. He cannot feel anything on his body. He drives this big car. In fact, he took myself and my brother out in it on his first drive up the mountains. We were very brave, but he's brilliant. He's so very positive. And what he does now, he is a motivational speaker. He goes round to schools, he goes round to Rotary clubs. He tells them about what happened, that split second, that small moment in his life that happened, that's changed his life. He can no longer be the forester. He still hunts. They made a special little platform for him in his wheelchair that he can prop his arm up and he can shoot the deer that we eat for dinner. But he still does it. His brother, the one that got married, carried him about a mile downriver on his back to go fishing. That's how close they are. That's how wonderful the family are. That's the family that took us in. That's the family that from that small moment of, shall we invite someone over to stay with us because we'll never get to America. That's how close we've got. And that little boy now sits in a wheelchair. He goes around to clubs like this. He goes to schools. He addresses huge meetings talking about life. You choose what happens to you. You make decisions. Some are good, some are bad, some can have a lasting effect. I have the greatest admiration for this boy. Jake French is his name. I will bring his book along that he wrote. It's got his story and it's got other people's story who've suffered similar accidents and made them into quadriplegics or they're paralysed in some way, altered their life. So that's what I mean by small things that happen that can have this effect on your life. If we'd never had that young lady into our house, we'd have never met the family, we'd have never travelled 37 years. God, that's a long time if you think you relate it to marriage. It's a long time to know people, and so I am very proud to know this family. We have a wonderful time when we get together. That's my story.
Time for a few questions of George. Ronnie's the first.
I wish I was giving the vote of thanks, because what a talk that was. I mean, George had about less than a week to put this together. It was a beautiful story, George, and thank you. It's heart-rending in places. But coming back to Oregon as such, my biggest memory of it, and I'm sure you feel the same, is the enormous number of trees, trunks, along the beaches. Do you know? Remember? Thousands and thousands and thousands.
Get washed up.
Get washed up from the rafts.
Yes.
And I tried for years afterwards to think of some way of getting a trucking company together, set it up over there, collect all these tree trunks and go into the lumber business, but I never did. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
I was going to say, George, if you still had the salmon, we could have done with that on Sunday, but it wasn't.
I do have one in the freezer, but it's not that one.
Any other questions, fellows?
Okay.
Falls upon me to thank George. The story you told ended up being a little bit too near to home. My broken neck
Absolutely.
11 months ago was fortunately less severe than that, although I couldn't feel a thing when I hit the deck, and it was one of the worst moments of my life, to sort of be lying in the road and feeling nothing. But on a lighter note, I'm still no wiser as to where Mount St Helena is, because the last quiz I went to, the answer was, they asked what state it was in, and the answer was it was a bloody awful state. It was low and
It's in Washington.
Thank you. Well, George, as ever, it's a pleasure to give a vote of thanks to a member, especially virtually off the cuff, as George, as Ron said, very short notice. It's a pleasure. So, fellows, can we give our thanks?